What's the scariest thing you've ever experienced? Standing on the front stoop of my apartment at 2 a.m. smoking a cigarette. Dead freaking silence the entire time I was standing there. All at once a train horn blows, the little 5-year-old girl next door screams and a wind gust comes out of nowhere slamming the open door against my shoulder. I swear to God for exactly 1 second I thought I was being attacked by a ghost. My heart was pounding, and I thought I was gonna cry. That crap probably took 2 years off of my life. For the record, little girl screamed probably cause her and her mama always stayed up late and were probably playing. Alright. I don't usually reply to this stuff, but I got one. I'm about 16 at the time, just relaxing at home alone watching TV in the dark with my bulldog named Holly. So we are laying together on the couch sharing snacks or whatever, and all of a sudden Holly gets up and slowly walks towards the hallway by the TV hunched over in attack mode. And I see his hair on his back stand up, and at the same time so does mine, and I'm covered in goosebumps and fear. I slowly stood up too, and we both just looked into the hallway, which seemed darker than the rest of the house, and it just felt like something was there looking back. A moment later it passed, Holly eases up, and I run, and turn every light on in the house. I still get chills thinking about it. I used to pet Holly and wonder if he still thought about that night too, but he was such a happy fat dog it probably never bothered him. He died in 2010 at the age of 12. When I was maybe 6 or 7, I was staying the night at my grandparents' house. I was on the couch trying to sleep when I heard whispering. They had a painting of my aunt hanging on the wall in the living room, and it was talking to me. Nothing creepy though. It was talking the way my aunt would talk to me, asking me if I was behaving, and typical aunt talk. She tells me to wake my grandfather up because she needs to talk to him. I did, and when he realized she wasn't there he began scolding me. In between threats and insults he noticed someone moving outside the window. He grabbed his pistol and told me to stay in the room with my grandmother. A minute or two later we hear a gunshot. Turns out there is a prison for young adults about 20 miles from where they live. 3 of them killed a guard and escaped. They were sizing the house up to take his truck and whatever they could, but he saw them first. Ended up shooting one of them in the shoulder. I have no idea why that freaking picture was talking to me. They've never experienced ghosts before or since. Edit. Ghosts may have been a bad choice of words, because my aunt is still alive to this day. To clear up any confusion, I have no idea why the picture was talking to me. I could have heard a noise that woke me up, and in my half awake, child state of mind imagined the picture talking to me. Or it could have been a guardian angel. I personally believe the first one. Either way, nothing like that has happened to me or anyone in my family before or after this incident. My childhood home was straight up haunted. My sister frequently complained about faces in the lights. My brother, maybe 5 at the time, came running in the house crying because the man hanging in the garage scared him. There was nobody there. I once woke up to a dark figure standing over my bed. I slept on the floor of my parents' room for days after that. There was an honest to God cave in the basement. Dirt walls, went back maybe 15 feet. I never went in there, so I can't say what was in it. Electronic devices would sometimes turn on by themselves. Our dog would stare at one corner in one room and growl. Eventually we ended up buying our neighbor's house, right across the street. One night, after the neighbors had moved out, but we hadn't yet moved in, my whole family was asleep. It was the middle of the night. Suddenly the fire alarms start going off. We all wake up, and my dad checks the house. Everything is fine. He takes the batteries out of the alarms and we all go back to bed. An hour or so later, we wake up to alarms again. This time it's the carbon monoxide detectors and the no battery fire alarms. My dad turns off the alarms. We grab blankets and sleeping bags, and we leave. That night we sleep in a big family huddle in the living room of our new house. My parents called someone to check the carbon monoxide at the house, and they report back that everything was normal. The next day we started moving and never slept in that house again. I've never experienced anything paranormal since then. Okay, so when I was a surgical resident I went to assist in what's euphemistically called a harvest. A 9-year-old kid had been hit by a car and been pronounced brain dead. His family wanted his organs to go to good use, so we went there to collect the organs. He came in on a ventilator, but with his heart beating and alive appearing. We opened him up end to end, got ready to clamp off all the major organs, poured an ice, and then took them all out. I met a guy who got his kidney and another who got his liver. The liver guy would certainly be dead without it, and the kidney guy probably. His other kidney, and heart, and some of his gut all went to good uses. As much as I knew he was already dead, it was still really difficult to come to terms with. Definitely the most creepiest thing. I work in family medicine now. When I was 16, I was in a summer work exchange in Quebec, Canada. One night, I invited a friend from the program to stay over at my billet family's home for the night. We slept downstairs in the basement, as they had a couch and a spare mattress down there. The actual event is quite fuzzy, but I remember waking up, sensing something was wrong. I looked up, and there was a shadowy figure/person standing above me, and the figure grabbed my breast. I didn't know how to react in my brain fog, and it seems the figure went back upstairs, and out the front door. I laid there for a moment in the darkness, and noted the stuffed animal I slept with. I was young, and it was from the boyfriend at the time, was several feet away from the head of the mattress. Once I was slightly more coherent, I began to shake and knew I had to let the billet parents know. I went up the stairs to the main floor, and noticed the front door was wide open, with the sun just rising. This is when I realized that something freaky had happened. I hurried up to the top floor to where the bedrooms were, and whipped on the light of the parents' room. I tried to explain that someone had been in the house and grabbed me, but keep in mind, I was a 16-year-old kid in a huge panic. My many years of French immersion in school did not teach me the French words for boob or home invasion. The billet mother seemed pretty pissed that I had woken them up. It took a lot of broken French and hand gestures to get the point across. They did contact the local police, and they sent an officer over who thankfully spoke English. Nothing ever did come from it, and my friend who had slept overslept through the entire thing. Almost 15 years later, and it still sticks with me. Creepiest, I was in New York taking a training course, and I was up late writing a paper. When I finished, it was about 3 AM, so I decided to go downtown, find a Kinko's, print the paper, and then go to a diner and study before class. I was standing on the platform waiting when suddenly I saw a massive black man, around 6 feet 4 inches, in a yellow leather suit with matching fedora, and the whites of his eyes were blood red. He's standing about a meter away from me, just staring at me. He didn't make any noise, he just sort of showed up. I got on the subway, and so did he, sitting across from me, staring directly at me. No blinking, no speaking, just staring until I got off. Scariest, one night, my wife was in Europe on a business trip, so my daughter, who was about 10 years old at the time, and I were alone in the house. I got up at about 2 AM, because I could not sleep. I went into the living room to sit down, but I didn't turn on the lights, because I didn't want to wake my daughter, but she was actually awake and thought it would be fun to creep up behind me and surprise me. I walked into the living room. I looked at the plate glass window leading to the balcony and saw someone standing behind me. I yelled and swung around, but at the last split second realized it was my daughter. If my instincts had been any slower, I would have punched my daughter in the face with full force. I'm not sure which is scarier, being scared in the first place, or almost belting my little girl in the face. I had this dream that my brother killed someone and hid the body in our pool. It was in the winter and the tarp was on, so he was able to hide the body for some time. Eventually spring came, and he was trying to get the body out to hide it, but it was so waterlogged that it was falling apart in his hands. The freaky thing is how real it felt, and the amount of detail. It felt like I was actually living this in real life. I could remember news reports about the missing person, how I found out that he killed the man, my mom begging me not to report him to the police, the rotting flesh melting off the face of the dead person as he took it out of the pool, the police sirens, and it ended with me being so traumatized of what I saw I was placed in a mental health ward. I woke up crying, and it took hours for me to calm down and start my day. It took a day or two to finally understand and process it was a dream. It took months for me not to be scared of my brother. My brother is super chill and the person in the dream was the complete opposite of him in real life. It's weird to explain, but I felt that I had to learn how to trust him again. It's been years since that dream, but it was so real and lucid. I've never had such a lucid dream since, and I really hope I don't. I got into a fight with my boyfriend while over the phone, and because I was a stupid teenager, I decided to walk to his house in the middle of the night. Problem is, that meant passing through a dimly lit, questionable part of town. But of course, who gives a freak, thought my 18-year-old self, as I trudged onward, even though my face was streaked with tears. I got a nosebleed too, because I was stressed, so blood dribbled down my sweater, but I was so edgy I just kept going. Suddenly I came across a group of guys who had a ladder propped up against a wall. Right on the other side was one of those wealthy houses that were part of a subdivision. I froze. They hadn't noticed me, probably 4 or 5 of them, with one guy already climbing the ladder. But one of them turned his head and looked straight at me. I remember my heart pounding, my mind screaming to run, even though my feet wouldn't move. I thought I was going to be killed. The guy let out a yelp. This got the attention of the others, and I heard a lot of panicked expletives. Turns out seeing a bloody girl in the middle of nowhere will deter any criminal. It didn't help that I have stereotypical Asian features, complete with the Heim cut with bangs that reach my eyes. In hindsight, to them, I looked like something out of a horror movie, even though I was in my pajamas. The guy fell off the ladder, and along with the rest, jumped into their car and drove off. For the first time I was thankful of my spontaneous nosebleeds. I guess it wouldn't be scary for me, but it was for my parents. I talked to my dead uncle when I was around 5 or 6. They thought I had an imaginary friend. Turns out when that imaginary friend happened to be named Uncle Ben, the hairs on the back of my parents' neck stood up. He had died around a year before I was born. He was also incredibly close to my father. And then there was this one time I was driving down this road in Hawaii. I was on a rather forlorn stretch when all of a sudden the temperature dropped from 80 degrees to around 50 degrees and the windows of my car fogged up greatly. I put on my hazards and started slowing to the side when all of a sudden it got to normal temperature again, and the windows defogged itself almost immediately. And it wasn't a typical kind of cold either. It had this kind of chill that I would feel during a windy snowy day in the Sierras, the kind that pierces jackets. I could see my breath too, so I definitely knew it was pretty cold. Yeah, that Hawaii incident definitely gave me the spooks. When I was 10, I was home alone one night. My mom was divorced, and she was working nights at the time. This was in the late 90s in a quiet town in Sweden, so we didn't really have a habit of locking the door. I was in bed, hadn't fallen asleep yet. All of a sudden, the front door opens and someone walks in. It's too early for my mom to get home. I sit up and outside of my room, in the kitchen, I can just about make out the shape of a very tall, to me, man. He stops dead in his tracks before casually saying hello. I turn on my nightlight and the dude immediately starts making small talk to avoid freaking me out, mentioning my mom by name and things like that, so at least I knew he was an acquaintance of hers. Still, something felt wrong. He was talking about my mom's old antique flintlock ornaments, saying she had promised to sell them to him, and he kept looking around my room, spotted my Nintendo 64, and asked if I was thinking about selling it. I wasn't. He told me he was only here because his mom had a bad stomach and needed to use the bathroom. I just nodded and said okay. He leaves the room and opens the front door and I can hear someone enter, and she's speaking in a low voice, so I can't really tell, but I think it was an older woman. He pops his head back into my room and tells me I can go back to sleep and that they'll be out in no time. I'm a little scared still, so I do as he says, and I turn off the light and lay back down. For almost half an hour I can hear him moving around in our apartment before there's a flush of the toilet, and shortly after I hear the front door close. I get up, make sure there's no one else in the apartment, then I lock the front door and go back to sleep. Next morning when I wake up, my mom is wondering about some missing things. The freaker stole our VCR, a couple of gold rings and my mom's silk pajamas. I was sitting on the balcony around 2 or 3 AM smoking. I have a lot of flowers in pots, some are hung, some are on the ground. I also have lights and you can see pretty clear. All of a sudden one of the flowers just started shaking, as if wind was blowing it, but there was no wind and all the other flowers stood still. I kept my eye on it and around it thinking it was a bee or some kind of bug, but I didn't see or hear anything. Plus it was shaking in a way that human hands would shake it left-right. Probably when I was having fever-induced hallucinations when I was 7 years old. I had these glow-in-the-dark stars plastered on my wall, and because of that I could see the room literally twisting. And the wall was moving in and out. It was really freaky. I had some horrible dreams that night. Like and subscribe for more Reddit videos.